In the American justice system, a confession, it's often seen as the ultimate proof of guilt, like a definitive end to a mystery. But what happens when that confession, it's not an ending, but it's the beginning of a lie? A lie that condemns a 20-year-old psychiatric patient, while police, they just ignore evidence that points directly to one of their own. This is the story of Sandra Hemme, and it's the story of 43 years lost, the longest wrongful imprisonment of a woman in United States history. Okay, so it's November 13th, 1980, St. Joseph, Missouri. The body of Patricia Jeschke, she was a local library secretary. She's discovered in her apartment. And the scene is just brutal. She's been beaten, strangled with a pair of pantyhose, her hands bound behind her back. Police, they have no immediate suspects, no signs of forced entry, just a few scant clues, 2 unidentified black hairs, and pieces of a cut antenna wire. So 12 days later, police get a call to a nearby house. There's a young woman, she has a knife, and she's hiding in a closet, just refusing to leave. And they find 20-year-old Sandra Hemme. Now Sandra, she has this long, really painful history of severe mental illness. I mean, she's been in and out of institutions since she was 12 years old. She was tormented by auditory hallucinations, treated with electroconvulsive therapy. So the police, they take her to a psychiatric hospital. And this is where the search for justice just veers into a dark, deliberate injustice. Detectives, they start interviewing Sandra at the hospital, and she is just heavily medicated, completely disoriented. Over several days, she gives this series of, bizarre and contradictory statements. So first, she claims she was with this man named Joseph Wobski, and she says he killed Jeschke. So the police investigate, but it turns out Wobski has an ironclad alibi. He was in a locked detox facility at the time of the murder. So the lead detective confronts Hemme about this, and she gets upset, confused. She even says she doesn't even know if she killed Jeschke. The detective, he actually notes in his report that he's, quote, not getting the truth, and he steps aside. But then new detectives take over, and on December 10th, they get what they want. Sandra Hemme confesses. She says she killed Patricia Jeschke, acting alone. The only problem with this? Her confession is a work of fiction. It's built from newspaper clippings and police suggestions. She gets the murder weapon wrong. She describes the victim's car incorrectly. She literally cannot provide a single detail that wasn't already public knowledge. But the police had their confession, and so Sandra Hemme was charged with capital murder. So while all the detectives were single-mindedly focused on Sandra, a much more credible suspect had emerged, a St. Joseph police officer. His name was Michael Holman. His white Ford truck, it matched witness descriptions of a vehicle seen right near the victim's apartment. And get this, just 1 week after the murder, a store clerk in Kansas City identified Officer Holman as the man who tried to use Patricia Jeschke's stolen credit card. When they questioned him, Holman just spun this flimsy story. He claimed he just happened to find her purse in a ditch. He said he was at a nearby motel with some mystery woman named Mary, but the motel manager didn't recognize him, had no record of his stay. During a search of his home, police found jewelry boxes his own wife had never seen before. Disbelieving, the investigation into Officer Michael Holman simply stalled. He was their colleague, and Sandra Hemme, she was a troubled, convenient scapegoat. So Sandra's first attorney did, little to challenge the state's narrative. She was pressured to plead guilty. In a bizarre court proceeding, the judge actually refused her plea at first, stating her testimony was too inconsistent to prove guilt. But after a short recess, she was brought back and pled guilty again. Years later, an appeals court ordered a new trial, finding her attorney had been grossly unethical. But at her 1985 retrial, the outcome was the same. The jury heard her rambling, unreliable confession. They were told that hair found at the scene had, quote, microscopic similarities to Holman's, but that it was inconclusive. What they were not told was that the prosecution was hiding evidence. They never heard that the victim's father had positively identified a pair of earrings found in Holman's house as a gift he had given his daughter. They never heard that an FBI report could not eliminate Officer Holman as the source of a palm print found on the antenna wire at the crime scene. The prosecution had buried the truth.
Sandra Hemme was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. For decades, Sandra just sat in a prison cell, the world forgetting her name. It wasn't until around 2006, with her mental illness finally managed by new medication, that she began her fight in earnest, reaching out and eventually connecting with the Innocence Project. Her new legal team, they filed a petition for habeas corpus, and through these determined public records requests, they unearthed the dusty police files. And there it was, in black and white, all the evidence the prosecution had deliberately buried. The earrings report, the palm print analysis, the full scope of Holman's other criminal conduct. In January 2024, a judge held an evidentiary hearing. An expert on false confessions systematically dismantled Hemme's statements, showing how they were contaminated, how they were coerced. A Harvard psychiatrist explained how her severe mental illness made her uniquely vulnerable to police pressure. On June 14, 2024, Judge Ryan Horseman granted Hemme's petition. His ruling was a damning indictment of the state. He ruled that prosecutors had hidden critical evidence pointing to her innocence, and her defense had been a failure. He ordered a new trial. After 43 years, Sandra Hemme was finally released from prison on July 19, 2024. 6 months later, all charges were formally dismissed. She was, at last, a free woman. The system that failed Sandra, it's the same system in place today. It took 40 decades, an army of dedicated lawyers, and a mountain of suppressed evidence to undo one coerced confession from a frightened, mentally ill girl. And Officer Michael Holman, who died in 2015, was never charged. It leaves us with a question we really have to confront. Now here's a question we'd like you to think about. If our justice system can look away when a police officer is the prime suspect in a murder, and instead choose to build a case on the words of a vulnerable psychiatric patient, how many other truths are buried in a filing cabinet, just waiting for the light?